G'day, welcome to this presentation on the assignment tasks for the Diploma of Human Resources Management unit that's called Manage Industrial Relations. Big responsibility in the modern world. So you'll notice in your assignment you've got option 1 and option 2. I prefer that you ignore option 1, which is based on the toolbox, because if you work and you've got access to agreements and awards, much better to do option 2, which is based on the real world. Even though you're going to make some sort of CEO reports that you might have just made up. But anyway, you'll get a much better feel for this unit if you use the option 2. So I'm allowing people to do this individually or in groups if that works out for you. Groups of up to 3. I just need to get you to sign a declaration if you do that, just to show that you've equally contributed, you understand completely what the others have done, to make sure it's a team effort, not just individuals making up little bits and pieces of it. So obviously you'll need access to the current award that you're talking about or the agreement that you're working under in your industry. Before you sort of start this, you need to be able to sort of look at that because you're going to base the recommendations on changes to that. Okay, so task A, compile a report to the CEO. So he or she will be getting a couple of reports from you from this assignment. But the first one's about entering into an enterprise agreement, if we're going to do that and replace the current award or update the current agreement to a new one. So the report is going to cover 5 things here. So 1 is an analysis of the organisation's strategic and operational plans that demonstrate any advantages of an enterprise agreement. Okay, so in other words, if there's a strategic direction for more flexible opening hours for a business or running extra shifts or whatever, then we can have an agreement that tries to assist employees in doing that, whether that means we have flexible hours so we cover the hours that meets the needs of the employees as well, or it might have overtime considerations and things like that. So whatever fits with the organisation's current plans, and that could be downsizing as well, of course, then that's what we're going to say, well, this is where an enterprise agreement could help. Then the next part, number 2A, briefly summarise the intent of the Fair Work Australia Act. So fortunately, that's listed in the text that you've got. There's a brief summary there that you might be able to just put into your own words. Just allows me to make sure that you understand the intent of the Act, not necessarily know all of the regulations which are about this thing. List and briefly describe the National Employment Standards, the NES, and whether they might impact on current working arrangements. Okay, so what are those? There's 10 of them. I think I can say that up front. I don't need to know all the details, just name them up and a brief summary of each one in your own words would be great. And we're just assuming here the CEO may not know what those are. And he also may not know what takes precedence, the award, the agreement, or these national employment standards. So number C here, there, or part C, briefly describe the individual flexibility arrangements that are allowed under the Fair Work Australia. So these are the IFAs, as they're called, pretty topical at the moment because of the current elections coming up, that they're going to be talked about a lot. So I just need to know that you know what they're about, and later on you get a bit more exploring with those anyway. D then is, does an enterprise agreement take precedent over the NES? So it's a straight out question, isn't it? But yes, no, but the CEO may not know this. So in other words, you're establishing with him or her what the hierarchy is there. What is the overriding thing, what can't be contravened. So moving on to number 3 then, within task A review of the current industrial relations procedures and analysis of 3 possible new IR initiatives or procedures resulting with the establishment of an enterprise agreement. Whew. So these could be IFAs, the individual flexibility arrangements, or changes within the agreement. So we're going to come up with 3 of them that might help out the business. This analysis must include a cost, benefit and risk assessment associated with implementing the new procedures that may benefit the organisation. So these 3 things, whatever they are, whether it's annualised hours or changes to penalty rates and more flexible time away from work and things like that. We need to look at, okay, what are the costs to the business of doing this? What are the benefits? And obviously the benefits are meant to outweigh the costs, because this is a business initiated sort of process. So I don't necessarily need dollars and cents here, but if you can just list what the costs are, what the benefits are, and make it fairly obvious that the benefits are going to outweigh the costs, or at least expected to. And then a risk analysis. Okay, by doing this, what risks are we introducing into the employment relationship? Will it be easy for people to be off work and absent with that sort of stuff? That's a risk. I can't think of a situation where that might be the case, but so a risk analysis, and then, okay, if there is a risk, what are we going to put in place to try and minimise that risk within these procedures you're talking about? So I hope that's fairly clear. Describe the negotiation or bargaining strategies considered appropriate for the proposed agreement or flexibility arrangement conditions, including provision for the negotiations with unions, if needed or desired, individual employees and line managers. So what creative things can you think of that might ensure there's an effective communication process here, so that the negotiations and the bargaining will be hopefully to our advantage, but everyone understands it? So as a minimum, I suppose we're going to get feedback, aren't we, from the parties involved, whether it's a union or not. I think the lights just went out. I've just reached across here and activated a device that puts them back on again. And unfortunately they haven't. I hope you can still see me, but I'm going to keep talking. So we're describing the process and what sort of arrangements you can have there to make sure the negotiations run smoothly. And lastly, in that's one, number 5, describe the legal requirements and processes to be followed to establish an enterprise agreement. So we need to go to the Fair Work Commission probably on the guide to making agreements, and look through all the step-by-step requirements for that, the timelines, the requirements for the vote and things like that. So I hope that's fair enough. So task B, I'm just going to try this one more time and see if I can get it to work. Yes, the lights are coming on, so you might see me a little bit brighter now. Hopefully that's a bit better. Whoa, I think it's brighter than it was before. Task B, develop an implementation plan to complete the changeover to the enterprise agreement. Okay, so this is the planning process, if you like, for industrial relations, part of this unit that we're looking for here. So there'll be a timeline and milestones, no doubt, that you'll put in there for when you expect the agreement to be finally negotiated. And that's going to include the information you got from the previous task, isn't it? What steps you need to follow to make a legal agreement. So number 2 within task B is develop contingency plans for the possible risks determined in task A, part 3. So these are the things that you come up with for the enterprise agreement, which could be individual flexibility arrangement clauses, as well as for the possibility that negotiations may fail completely. So what are you going to put in place there? So there's one fairly obvious contingency, isn't it? And that's just to stick with the current award or agreement. But you might think of some others there as well. Number 3 then, recommend training and development strategies, including conflict management, to assist HR staff or other HR staff and line managers with a changeover. So what training and development would we need to see for the people who might be negotiating? So it could be about negotiating, it could be about communication, it could be about how to manage conflict, how to be assertive, all of these sort of things. I'd like you to come up with those. Number 4 there is report on evaluation methods that could monitor the success or failure of the possible new procedures covered in the enterprise agreement and their impact on your organisation after implementation. So in other words, what are we going to do to monitor those costs in the cost-benefit analysis you did before, monitor the risks that you looked at before? We try to make sure that the benefits we wanted, whether that was increased motivation or increased productivity or decreased absenteeism, decreased turnover rates, things like that. We wanted to actually, okay, how will you measure those things? So that's the end of task B. Task C now is access and review the grievance or dispute resolution procedures for your organisation. And let's sort of analyse them for their effectiveness, report on the following points and make recommendations to improve the process where appropriate. So against these things, how easy is it to understand, and are staff aware of the procedures? The early identification of grievances, disputes and conflict. The management of conflict when it occurs. Alleviation or elimination of the cause of conflict. Referral to external bodies when and if required. So you may have an employee assistance program where you have external counsellors appointed, but you may not. And if you don't, where could that external advice be sought from? Appropriate specialist advice sought when needed, just a bit what I was just saying then. Monitoring of an organisation to minimise dysfunctional conflict. So how do we actually monitor what conflict occurs and whether it's... So obviously you can have functional conflict, you can have conflict that's healthy, people being critical but still being fair to each other and being honest. But dysfunctional conflict, you can imagine where things aren't quite so clear-cut, people are really angry, disputes occur all the time, productivity gets lost, that sort of stuff. So that's dysfunctional conflict. Regular review and improvements made to the procedures and process. So they're the things we like to report against there. For task D then, briefly define the following terms. So this is either straight out of the text or from Fair Work or whoever, but I want these in your words if you wouldn't mind. Just so I can see that you understand what they are. So I'm just going to list them here. Unfair dismissal, small business fair dismissal code, so they're pretty related, those two things. Collective bargaining, protected industrial action, log of claims, job sharing, outsourcing, annualised hours, salary packaging, novated leases, which are quite often in salary packaging, common law contract, the better off overall test, so that's a pretty important one to remember, the boot test, because that's going to be the test for whatever we put in our new agreement. Mediation, conciliation and arbitration, the differences between those. Procedural fairness, what is that? And an employee assistance program, I actually mentioned a little bit earlier. So that's the end of what that is meant to cover in the presentation. I do apologise for the lighting coming and going. I hope you can understand what I was saying, whether you can see me or not. Anyway, thanks for that. I'll see you later.